Now then, Vinyl Monkey here. Welcome everybody. It's been some week actually since my last video. Something funny's been going on. I'm not sure what. I did a video last week. It was just a run-of-the-mill video for me, I suppose. It was. I didn't think it was anything special. It was called 20 almost perfect albums. So not my best, not my favourite, but albums that I thought within their own little entities were almost perfect pieces of work. And anyway, I noticed all this extra email traffic. I usually get, I don't know, a couple of hundred views and maybe a dozen or so comments, but the comments kept coming in, and I noticed the views were going up, and it seems like I had sort of 10 times as many views and comments on this one as what I generally do. So I have no idea why that was. I did ask my son, and he said it's to do with the YouTube algorithms, but I've got to admit to you, I haven't the foggiest idea what an algorithm is, so I'm none the wiser in relation to that. But anyway, the purpose of this little intro is to say there are quite a few new people to the channel, I think, who've sort of latched on in the last week. Whether they ever come back again, I don't know. But if you have, welcome to all the old friends as well. Hopefully you might stick with it if you find any of this interesting. And I was just, given that there are some new people, I was just going to introduce myself really, very briefly before I get on to this week's video. And so Vinyl Monkey, yeah, I'll explain why it's called Vinyl Monkey in a minute. Real name's Malcolm, or Mally to my mates. I live in a small town, Hartlepool, on the northeast coast of England. Population about 95,000, something like that. An old fishing and steel town, been around for a long time, the town, and stuck out here on the North Sea coast. It's a town us Hartlepoolians are really proud of, and yeah, the one thing we're perhaps best known for is our nickname as Monkey Hangers, and that's hence my my moniker, my YouTube channel name, which is Vinyl Monkey, and it's a reference to that nickname of Monkey Hangers, which dates back to a legend that suggests that in the Napoleonic Wars, a French ship was wrecked offshore, and there were no survivors apart from a monkey that was washed up with the wreckage, and the good folk of Hartlepool, never having seen either A, a French person, or B, a monkey, assumed that the monkey was a French person and set up a court and a gallows on the beach, tried the monkey, decided he must be a spy, and hung him on the beach, or her on the beach. And that legend travelled all the way around the world, and it's very rare you can go anywhere now and mention where you're from and somebody hasn't heard of that legend, and it's one that we certainly don't take, us Hartlepoolians don't take that as derogatory. We're quite proud of that little legend as well as we are of our town. So anyway, rambling on, this is what this week's about. I was going to be doing something about artists from my neck of the woods, i.e. northeast England and this local area, but then I got distracted watching other videos, and lots of people in the vinyl community are currently doing a video around their top 10 go-to or most played albums. What are the albums that, you know, if you're wandering and you're not in the mood for listening to anything particular, or you haven't got any new records lined up to listen to, what are the ones that you pull off the shelves most often in those circumstances? And that intrigued me, that question. I thought, I wonder if I can work that out, and I had a quick flick through all of the albums, and yeah, it came down to just over a dozen or so albums that I reckon certainly over the last 3 or 4 years are my most played. And so I'm going to share those with you now, without further ado, and I'm going to go in chronological order. I'm going to start way back in 1962 and finish up in about 8 years ago in 2015. And the section in this record collection that I go to most in those circumstances, you know, I've come in, no particular agenda, I might be a bit stressed, or I might be a bit distracted or whatever, and I'm not really thinking I just want to play something, the section I go to most in those episodes is probably the jazz section. Don't know why, maybe because it's largely instrumental, it quickly evokes moods and lets you sort of get lost in it. I don't know, maybe that's why, but these are some of the jazz records that I listened to most over the last few years, and I love piano jazz, and I love nobody more than Mr. Thelonious Monk. This is the Thelonious Monk Quartet, Monk's Dream. I mean, I tend to prefer jazz pianists in as small a group as possible, often just bass and drums alongside them. This is a quartet, so in addition to bass and drums, we've got the brilliant Charlie Rouse on tenor sax, but this quartet, their playing is such that it really allows Monk's piano, with his sort of, I don't know, simple but arrhythmic and sort of difficult and occasionally dissonant sort of melodies and notes to really shine through. And I just absolutely, I adore all the, I've got, I don't know, half a dozen of Monk's albums here, and this is the one I've played most of recently, from 1962. He was credited with the saying or the motto that there's no such thing as a bad note on a piano, and I think Les Dawson took up something similar, didn't he, later on? No, it was Eric Morecambe, that's right, yeah. Anyway, yeah, Eric Morecambe had a variation on that, but anyway, brilliant stuff. Thelonious Monk Quartet, Monk's Dream from 1962. The following year, 1963, this is the Sidewinder by a band led by the brilliant trumpeter Lee Morgan. He was only 25, a virtuoso trumpet player when he brought this album out. The title track, the Sidewinder, you might be familiar with. It's just one of those catchy, infectious tunes. It always seems to me like I've heard this somewhere. I don't know whether it's been in films or whether it ever, I'm not aware that it was a single. It might have been, I don't know, but it's one of those hard bop jazz tunes that you think, I always think I've heard that around before. And Morgan's trumpet, absolutely brilliant, but the joint star of this album is probably the tenor sax player Joe Henderson, and it's that interplay between tenor sax and trumpet is absolutely spellbinding, and the whole thing is driven along. It's got a brilliant groove through this album by the rhythm section, the bass and drums and the piano, Barry Harris on piano. Superb album, 1963, the Sidewinder, Lee Morgan. The next one's 1966, and this is Chris Farlow, 14 Things to Think About. I think this was his first album, certainly his first album on the Immediate record label. And Chris Farlow, I think up to this point, he'd largely been a sort of singing the clubs and in the London area. He's a Cockney, I'm sure he's a Cockney. But he came to the attention of Jagger, Richards and others who were more established in the business, and Jagger and Richards donated him quite a few songs, including a couple of the singles he had success with, including the first track on this album, Think. And he's just got a brilliant soul voice. I mean, in terms of British white soul singers, him and Eric Burdon right up there. And I play this probably because I've seen Chris Farlow live loads of times in small places, large places, festivals, supporting people, singing in pubs, all sorts of things, and it's just always such a brilliant night, and it just brings back those brilliant nights to listen to that great voice. So 1966, 14 Things to Think About, Chris Farlow. My next one is 1968, and this is another soul singer. This is the Northern Soul legend, Donnie Albert. And this is one of those budget LPs introducing Donnie Albert. It looks like, the sort of packaging, it looks like, you know, it's one of those that was half the price of it or less of a normal album. And certainly nowadays it appears in the bargain bins, or it appears for £3 or £4, certainly less than £5. I can't resist buying another copy when I see it, because it is so good. And I would urge anyone who hasn't got this, you pick them up dead easy. I see this one regularly in the second-hand record shops and car boot sales and all the rest of it. And it's just absolutely brilliant. What a voice. He plays most of the, or all of the instruments himself. He's doing a lot of sort of soul standards on it, some of the Motown stuff, Otis Redding type stuff. But he does it so well. And the other reason I play this as a go-to record, apart from great singer, great musician, great songs, is the actual sound quality of this. I mean, I know I keep saying it's a budget album, but the sound quality in terms of the separation between the instruments and the voice, absolutely stunning. It's just a joy, a pleasure in the ears. It's just absolutely fantastic. Introducing Donnie Albert, so good I bought it twice, from 1968. The next one, this is 1972, this is Wishbone Ash, this is Argus. Wishbone Ash, famed for their twin lead guitar songs. They were a sort of unique band, I think. They weren't, you know, it was hard to sort of pigeonhole them. They weren't sort of hard blues rock like Zeppelin or Purple. They weren't heavy metal like, or heavy rock like Sabbath. They weren't prog rock, certainly, but there were elements of all of those things in there. And I think they sort of, for a while, certainly for 4 or 5 or 6 albums, they sort of ploughed their own little furrow, and they did it so well. And this isn't my favourite Wishbone Ash album, certainly not my favourite album of the early 70s, but it's the one album I go to evoke those times, and there were such great times for me. I used to read the Sounds and the Enemy from front to back to front. I could name you all the members of all the, you know, all the British bands, particularly at the time. And this is the song that is, I suppose, it's perhaps the most well known of theirs, and some of the tracks on here: Time Was, Blowing Free, The King Will Come, absolute classics. And just for nostalgia reasons, really, I put this on, and it's like like a warm, being covered in a warm blanket and transported back to 1972. Beautiful. Wishbone Ash, Argus, from 1972. Then the year after, we're back into the soul area again. This is Billy Paul. He of the beautiful baritone voice, and probably best known for his hit single Me and Mrs. Jones, which a great single though that was. It doesn't do him credit. I've got loads of Billy Paul albums here, and I just love them. They're great, and this is my favourite of them, and the one I play the most often. And this is, I mean, look at that cover. Absolutely fantastic. It could be a sort of prog rock cover, couldn't it? And then you've got this totally over the top portrait of Billy Paul in the middle. Fantastic stuff. And then you've got 10-minute plus tracks on side one, and this is Soul Goes prog, but done absolutely beautifully. All the songs about Gamble and Huff, but sung and performed beautifully by Billy Paul. That's War of the Gods from 1973. Leaping into the 80s, this is the Rolling Stones' Tattoo You. Not my favourite Stones album, if you ask me. Not my probably not in my top 5 of Stones albums. Although a really good album, and it followed on. I don't know if this was the next album, but it was a couple of years later, a few years later than Some Girls, another great album. And this one is a game of two halves. The first side of it, starting with the classic Start Me Up, is a sort of hard rock, fast hard rocking sort of side of music. But it's side 2 here, which is my go-to side. I mean, normally on my go-to records, or any records, I side 1, and then if I'm into it, play the whole thing, which is my preference. This one I invariably go to side 2, which is the sort of slower ballads, Worried About You, Tops, Heaven, No Use Crying, and then the classic, brilliant Waiting on a Friend, which I think it's the great Sonny Rollins does the sax solo on it, but absolutely brilliant stuff. And this just it brings me down, it puts me in an easy, feel-good sort of mood. Great stuff. Rolling Stones, Tattoo You from 1981. Then 2 years later, 1983, Van Morrison. I'm bound to have a Van Morrison album in here, aren't I? And again, nowhere near my favourite album, but this one just takes me back to one specific weekend, I think, and I just love to go back to that weekend. This came out in '83, and in the winter of '83, I went to the Lake District for a weekend in my old Cortina, and I put this onto cassette and was playing this repeatedly, just turning it back and forward over. There was snow on the mountaintops, frost on the roads and in the hedgerows. Really, the lakes were icy and sort of glassy and calm. The sky was blue, and just absolutely beautiful. And I love this period of Van Morrison, Mark Isham on trumpet, Pee Wee Ellis on saxophone. Just a brilliant band, and it was sort of spiritual, soulful sort of stuff, which I thought in the 80s was some of my favourite music to come out of the 80s, Van's output in that period. But what makes this one special and why it's one of my go-to, it's Van's piano playing. He's not renowned as a pianist, he's renowned as a harmonica player, saxophone player, he plays a lot of guitar, obviously his voice, but he doesn't tend to play piano, but he does on here, and he does it uniquely, very simply, but extremely effectively and hypnotically for me, and I just love it, particularly the instrumental tracks. Inarticulate Speech to the Heart from 1983. Then, leaping on, 1997, this is Teenage Fan Club. This must be their 4th or 5th album. I've got all their others, their earlier ones, which are a bit more grungy. This is more feel-goody, West Coast America meets Glasgow, rural Scotland, Highlands of Scotland, I suppose. And this is a love song not only to the mature love songs as well. They're not sort of schoolboy type love songs. These are mature people in mature relationships writing and singing love songs to their partners, but also to their country, to their geography, to their community. Brilliantly done. I seen them when they were touring this back then. I'm looking forward to seeing them again. I've got tickets to see them again in December, I think it is, this year. Teenage Fan Club, Songs from Northern Britain from 1997. Then Stephen Malkmus and the Jicks, the brilliant Stephen Malkmus. I've got most of the Jicks albums. I've got all the Pavement albums, and I love Pavement. Everybody loves Pavement, absolutely immortalised, I suppose. But my go-to I tend to play the Jicks records rather than the Pavement records, and maybe that's because they're slightly more upbeat, they're more accessible. They have all the Malkmus traits, brilliant guitar solos, off-kilter melodies, often witty sort of lyrics. And this has got all of that on its 3 sides. It's one of those 3-sided albums where the 4th side is just it's got no grooves in it, but it's gorgeous, brilliant stuff. Stephen Malkmus and the Jicks. This is Mirror Traffic from 2011. And then the last one, if there's one other genre, and I use that word, I don't like, for those who watched me before, I don't like to use the word genre in association with art, because I think it is often limiting. I certainly would never use it in literature, but I've used it, so I'm going to continue. It's going to rattle one of my friends, Colin. It's going to rattle his cage. He's going to have a go at me about it. Watch out in the comments for Colin having a bash at me. But anyway, apart from jazz and soul, my go-to genre, I suppose, would be Americana. And if I was doing 20 or 30 go-to records, I'd have had Al Gelb and Giant Sand, I'd have had Bonnie Prince Billy, I'd have had the Cowboy Junkies, I would have had Bill Callahan, I would have had all of those people. But the one I've got is Calexico. This is 2015, Edge of the Sun. Calexico, just brilliant evocation of the southwest of America and those borderlands between the USA and Mexico, and I suppose it's why do I pick this album and why do I play it so regularly? And I suppose for similar reasons to what I was talking about with some of the others, you know, transporting me back to a time, you know, the early 70s, or transporting me back to a particular weekend and location in the English Lake District. This one transports me to a place I've never ever been, never likely to go, but conjures up all these images, you know, often taken from Western movies and maybe novels that I've read, you know, and what they call him, I forgot his bloody name, it was just Cormac McCarthy novels. Those sorts of landscapes, and they do it so well, Calexico, and they evolve their sound, and it's a sort of mix of old country, Mexicana, new sounds. Great stuff from Joey Burns and John Convertino, who make up the heart of the band. Brilliant stuff. Calexico, Edge of the Sun from 2015. So they're my go-to records. I hope you stuck with that, and you might join me next week when I get back on track and look at artists from my neck of the woods. Cheers. Ta-ra.